What else here? On a very different point, but also a note of disappointment I detected in some of you, I want to think out loud for a moment on the topic of NFTs, which I broached on Twitter a few weeks ago, putting out a job listing for Waking Up. Waking Up is looking for a head of Web3 development. And let me find it here. I said on Twitter, attention all Web3 NFT maniacs. And then I linked to this job posting at Waking Up. And the response was mixed at best. Many of you said essentially, not you too, Sam. And essentially responded as though I had just announced that I was eager to perpetrate some kind of multi-level marketing scam on my audience. Let me take a moment to clarify a few things because this is actually something I want to do and I want to recruit some great person to help me do it. So this is my reiterating the job listing that can be found in that Twitter thread. So just to clarify for those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about. So NFTs, which are all the rage at the moment, are so-called non-fungible tokens. And without belaboring the point, I am convinced that this is a new technology that has and will do some very interesting things. It has solved the problem of digital ownership and digital scarcity, which is to say you can have an asset that exists as a JPEG or in some other digital form, and you can really be the sole owner of it, even if copies of it proliferate online. And you can layer onto that asset all kinds of other properties that are interesting, whether they also exist in digital space or whether they have real-world consequences, right? So you can have an NFT that is just a piece of artwork, but it can become your ticket to a live event or unlock some other opportunity or property in the real world. So I think that's very interesting, and I'm not at all cynical about the future there, although it is impossible not to be cynical about some of what we're seeing in this space, right? There is a kind of tulip mania to some of it. You've got these collections of mediocre artwork where the cheapest instance now costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. In principle, none of that's new. I mean, that's true of art in general. You know, beauty or significance is often in the eye of the beholder, and the fact that somebody can put a banana on the wall with duct tape and call it art, that precedes NFTs. But let me just float the first NFT idea we have here, just to give you a sense of how I'm thinking about it. And again, my purpose here is to recruit somebody who really understands this space better than I do and understands the possibilities, but who's aligned with my values here. So what's happening with these NFTs currently is you have people who are buying, Bored Apes or CryptoPunks, most famously, which are these cute little drawings, and they are trading in them. In many cases, they're holding them as their profile pictures, right? So if you own a Bored Ape that is worth $2 million, chances are you're using that as on social media as your profile picture. What's happening there? Well, people like these assets. They like the Bored Ape they bought, and they're putting it up there for that reason, presumably. But they're also signaling that they're rich enough to have spent $2 million on a JPEG that is not dissimilar to the 9,999 other JPEGs in that collection. So it is a kind of social signaling of wealth and conspicuous consumption, but that's not fundamentally new, and I'm not especially judgmental of that. But I'm interested in flipping this whole thing and in doing something truly good in the world. So those of you who heard my previous podcast with Sam Bankman-Fried about effective altruism might remember my description of the Giving What We Can pledge. This is the pledge that Will MacAskill and Toby Ord created, where people pledge to give a minimum of 10% of their lifetime earnings to the most effective charities. And this is a pledge I took a couple of years back, and Sam Bankman-Fried took it a few years before me. And About 7,000 people have taken it so far on the Giving What We Can website. What we're proposing to do at Waking Up is to create our version of the pledge. And we might add some other relevant wrinkle to it, but basically it'll be the same pledge. And we want to create NFTs based on the daily heads that have become this ever-present piece of artwork within the app, and give them out to perhaps 10,000 people who have taken that pledge. And consider what this will make possible. Right, so first, people will have a nice piece of artwork to use as their profile pic in the same way that they're doing with these other NFTs. And in fact, I'm already doing it on Twitter myself. I have a daily head as my Twitter avatar. So just imagine that's my NFT, right? Signifying that I've taken the Waking Up pledge. Imagine what happens once you've identified this community in this way. You've given them a way to identify themselves. It seems to me a very different kind of social signaling and status gets created here, and it's precisely the kind I would think we would want to incentivize. So we create these NFTs, we give them to the 7,000 people who've already taken the pledge over at Giving What We Can. We give them to a few thousand more who now take the pledge with us. And then we go out into the world looking for people who want to celebrate these people along with us. Right? So we could go to American Express and say, you've got this black card for people who just spend a lot of money. That's what you're rewarding here. Why not create a card for the people who've taken the Waking Up pledge and give them access to your airport lounges? And we can go to the NFL and say, why not reserve 50 seats at the Super Bowl for people who've taken the Waking Up pledge? We'll give you access to this very high leverage, very engaged community of people who have decided to do something quite good, and why don't you play this game with us? And then you can imagine that the value of these NFTs might grow, and there could be some secondary sales, because many of the people who've taken the pledge are not especially wealthy. Some are, but there may be people who have taken this pledge who are making $40,000 a year and just giving 10% of their money away every year. Well, if you're making $40,000 a year and all of a sudden the NFT that I gave you is worth $400,000, you might want to sell that NFT, right? And then in the sale, something like 80% of that might go to you, but 20% would go back to charities that we've already identified as some of the most effective at reducing human suffering and existential risk. It seems to me that there's a really interesting project here, which again, you're hearing all the rough edges here because we're still thinking it through, and I want to hire someone to help us think it through and to help create a community here that is fun and interesting and doing intrinsically good things. So if you're that sort of person, if you're living on the blockchain, if you know way more about what's possible here and what's coming than I do, we really want to hear from you over at Waking Up. Again, the link to the job description and application page is in my Twitter feed just a couple of weeks back. And if you're a corporation who would like to participate in this, again, why wouldn't you want to reserve some seats in your football stadium for these sorts of people, right? We're talking about people who have decided to give a minimum of 10% of their earnings every year to the most effective charities. You don't think it would be good for your brand to be incentivizing their behavior and meeting these people? So if you're a company that wants to be involved in this effort, please reach out to us. I guess we'll create a dedicated email address for this. So let's call it pledge@wakingup.com. Any ideas you might have about how you could make this fun for people? We would love to hear about it. That's just the first idea in this space, but it's the kind of idea that this technology has suddenly made possible. Everything I just said would make no sense without the blockchain and NFTs. It strikes me as a really promising and ethically fairly thrilling possibility. And it's one of the things that gets me excited about all of the chaos that we see around us, right? New things are being born moment by moment. And one of the purposes of what I'm doing here on the podcast is to figure out what to do with all of the opportunity we have to make our world better.